Your Honor, I am 8 years old, homeless, and I will be defending Mrs. Victoria Stone today. The words hung in the air like a bomb that hadn't exploded yet. Courtroom 7 of the Manhattan Family Court fell into absolute silence. The kind of silence that happens when everyone's brain stops working for a second because they can't process what they just heard. Judge Robert Harrison, a man who had presided over family court cases for 23 years, slowly removed his reading glasses and cleaned them with a handkerchief. He was sure, absolutely sure, that his ears had played a trick on him. Perhaps it was time to retire. Perhaps he was finally losing it. But when he put his glasses back on, the scene hadn't changed. Standing at the defendant's table, barely tall enough to see over it, was a small girl. She couldn't have been more than 8 or 9 years old. Her hair was tangled and dirty, pulled back in a messy ponytail. She wore a jacket that was at least 3 sizes too big, probably found in a donation bin. Her jeans had holes in the knees, not the fashionable kind, but the kind that come from actually falling on concrete. And her shoes were held together with duct tape. Yet, despite her appearance, she stood with perfect posture, her small hands resting on a stack of papers and books that she had clearly carried in herself. And she was looking directly at the judge with the kind of confidence that seasoned lawyers spend years trying to develop. The judge finally managed to speak, his voice barely above a whisper, asking the young lady if she had just said she was going to defend someone. The girl's voice was clear, steady, and surprisingly mature for someone so young. She confirmed that yes, she was there to defend Mrs. Stone, and proceeded to cite Article 12 of the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child, explaining that it stated every child capable of forming their own views had the right to express those views freely in all matters affecting the child. Legal proceedings were included in this definition, she added confidently. She was very capable of forming her own views, and she was there to exercise that right. The prosecutor, David Morrison, actually laughed out loud. It was the kind of nervous laugh that escapes when you're witnessing something so absurd that your brain doesn't know how else to react. He was a man in his mid-40s, wearing an expensive suit and a Rolex watch that probably cost more than most people's cars. He had been a prosecutor for 15 years and had seen some strange things in courtroom, but this was beyond anything in his experience. Morrison, still chuckling, told the judge this was clearly some kind of publicity stunt. He moved to have security remove the child from the courtroom immediately so they could proceed with actual legal proceedings. But Judge Harrison wasn't laughing. He was studying the little girl carefully. There was something about her, something in the way she stood, the way she organized her papers, the way she cited legal precedent without even blinking, that made him pause. Victoria Stone, the wealthy businesswoman sitting at the defendant's table, looked like she had seen a ghost. Her perfectly manicured hands covered her mouth in shock, and tears were already forming in her eyes. She was a woman in her early 50s, dressed in an elegant navy blue suit that screamed old money. Her lawyer, Michael Chen, one of the most expensive attorneys in New York, stood frozen beside her, completely unsure of what to do. Judge Harrison asked the young lady what her name was. She replied that her name was Lily Thompson. When he asked where her parents were, for the first time, a flicker of pain crossed the girl's face. But it was gone in an instant, replaced again by that same unwavering determination. Lily explained that her mother had passed away 6 months ago, and she had never known her father. She had been staying in various shelters since then, but mostly she slipped in the public library when they let her stay late. A murmur rippled through the courtroom gallery. About 30 people had shown up for this case, mostly reporters, court observers, and Victoria Stone's business associates who wanted to see the mighty fall. Judge Harrison felt his heart sink. He had 3 grandchildren around this girl's age. The thought of any of them homeless and alone was unbearable. The judge said gently that he understood Lily wanted to help Mrs. Stone, but this was a very serious legal matter. Mrs. Stone was accused of embezzlement, fraud, and misuse of charitable funds. These were complex criminal charges that even experienced lawyers struggled with. Lily was just a child. She should be in school, not on a courtroom. Lily responded with respect, saying she had been in school. She reached into her backpack, a torn, faded thing with cartoon characters that had long since washed away, and pulled out a library card. She explained it was from the New York Public Library main branch. She had been there every day for the past 6 months. She had read 73 books on law, including the complete Federal Rules of Criminal Procedure, the New York State Penal Law, several landmark Supreme Court cases, and every single document related to Miss Stone's case that was available through public records. She said this matter-of-factly, as if it were the most normal thing in the world for an 8-year-old to do. Morrison's smile had completely disappeared. He exchanged a worried glance with his assistant, a young woman who looked equally confused. Morrison tried again, saying that regardless of how many books this child had read, she was not a licensed attorney. She could not represent anyone in a court of law. It was literally against the rules. Lily interrupted, and Morrison's jaw tightened at being cut off by a child. She explained that actually, the Sixth Amendment guaranteed the right to counsel, but it didn't prohibit self-representation. And while Mrs. Stone technically had counsel, Mr. Chen, the law didn't specify that she couldn't speak on Mrs. Stone's behalf if she permitted her to do so as a friend of the court. Judge Harrison raised his eyebrows, asking if she meant amicus curiae. Lily confirmed that yes, she may not be a lawyer, but nothing in the law prevented a concerned citizen, regardless of age, from presenting information to the court that might aid in justice being served. Michael Chen, Victoria's actual lawyer, finally found his voice. He said he didn't even know what was happening and asked Mrs. Stone if she had arranged this, because if this was some kind of sympathy play. Victoria stood up abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. She insisted she swears she had no idea. She called out to Lily, asking her, "Sweetheart, what are you doing there?" The girl's expression softened for just a moment when she looked at Victoria. She said that she was there to help Mrs. Stone, like Mrs. Stone had helped her. And suddenly, the pieces started to click together in Judge Harrison's mind. This wasn't a random child who had wandered into his courtroom. There was a connection here, a story, and every instinct he had developed over 2 decades on the bench told him he needed to hear it. Judge Harrison said, "All right," making a decision that probably would get him reprimanded by his superiors later. He was going to allow this, but with strict conditions. Lily could present information to the court, as she had mentioned, as a friend of the court. But Mr. Chen remained Mrs. Stone's legal counsel of record. She would not be making official legal arguments, conducting cross-examinations, or engaging in formal courtroom procedure. He asked if that was understood. Lily nodded seriously, thanking the judge. Morrison shot up from his chair, saying he had to object in the strongest possible terms. This was highly irregular. The prosecution had prepared for this case for 6 months. They had evidence, they had witnesses, they had a solid case against Mrs. Stone. They could not allow a child, a homeless child with no legal training, to derail these proceedings with emotional manipulation. Lily's voice cut through the courtroom with unexpected sharpness. She asked what emotional manipulation Morrison was referring to. She hadn't said a single emotional word. She had only cited laws and constitutional rights. If he was worried about manipulation, perhaps he should examine his own tactics. A few people in the gallery actually snickered. Morrison's face turned red. Judge Harrison had to hide a smile behind his hand. He told Morrison his objection was noted for the record, but he was going to exercise his discretion as the presiding judge. They would proceed. Lily could sit next to Mrs. Stone. The judge turned to Chen, assuming he had no objection. Chen looked at Victoria, who nodded eagerly through her tears. Chen said he had no objection, though he sounded completely bewildered.
Lily walked around the defendant's table and climbed onto the chair next to Victoria. She had to sit on her knees to be at the right height. As she did, Victoria reached over and squeezed her small hand. Lily squeezed back. Judge Harrison said it was time to proceed and asked Mr. Morrison if he would like to present his opening statement. Morrison stood, straightening his tie and trying to recover his composure. But as he began to speak, he couldn't help glancing at the small girl taking notes with a pencil on a piece of paper she had pulled from her backpack. Morrison began by telling the court that the facts of this case were simple and damning. Victoria Stone had founded the Hope for Tomorrow Foundation 5 years ago, claiming it would help underprivileged children in New York City. She had solicited donations from wealthy benefactors, raised over $3 million, and promised that every penny would go to helping children in need. Morrison walked toward the center of the courtroom, his voice growing stronger with each sentence. He continued, saying that instead of helping children, Mrs. Stone had helped herself. Their investigation had revealed that she used foundation money to purchase a vacation home in the Hamptons. She bought expensive jewelry. She took luxury trips to Europe, all charged to the foundation credit cards. Meanwhile, the children she claimed to help saw almost none of that money. Receipts, bank statements, and credit card records didn't lie, he insisted. He turned to face Victoria directly, declaring that Mrs. Stone had presented herself as a philanthropist, a humanitarian, a woman who cared about those less fortunate. But in reality, she was running a sophisticated con game, exploiting people's generosity for her own enrichment. The evidence was overwhelming, and they would prove beyond any reasonable doubt that Victoria Stone was guilty of embezzlement, fraud, and betrayal of public trust. As Morrison sat down, clearly satisfied with his opening, Lily's pencil never stopped moving. She was writing furiously, filling page after page with notes. Judge Harrison turned to Michael Chen, asking if the defense wished to make an opening statement. Chen stood up, looking nervous. He had been hired only 3 weeks ago when Victoria's previous lawyer quit, claiming the case was unwinnable. He hadn't had nearly enough time to prepare, and now he had a wild card, a homeless 8-year-old sitting at his table. Chen stated that the defense maintained Mrs. Stone was innocent of all charges. They would show that there were explanations for every transaction the prosecution had highlighted, and that Mrs. Stone had always acted with the best intentions for the children her foundation served. He thanked the court. It was weak, and everyone in the room knew it. Chen sat down quickly. Then Lily raised her hand. Judge Harrison blinked, acknowledging her. Lily asked if she could say something before they proceeded. Morrison groaned audibly, saying they couldn't let a child interrupt every proceeding. Judge Harrison said he would allow it. He was curious now, deeply curious. He told Lily to go ahead. The little girl stood up on her chair again so everyone could see her. She held her papers in both hands, and for a moment Judge Harrison saw them trembling slightly. She was nervous. Of course she was. She was 8 years old in a courtroom full of adults, about to speak in defense of someone accused of serious crimes. But when Lily spoke, her voice was steady. She began by saying that Mr. Morrison had presented a story that sounded convincing. He had receipts and bank statements and credit card records, and he was right about one thing. Those documents didn't lie. But documents only told part of the story. They told what happened, but they didn't tell why. She paused, looking around the courtroom.
Lily explained that 6 months ago, she became homeless when her mother died from cancer. Her mother had no insurance. They lost everything paying for her treatment. When her mother passed away, she had nowhere to go. She spent her first 3 nights on the street, behind a dumpster, terrified that someone would hurt her. She was 8 years old and completely alone in the world. The courtroom had gone completely silent again, but this was a different kind of silence.
People were leaning forward now, listening. She continued, describing how on her fourth night, she was sleeping on a bench in Central Park when a woman found her. It was 2 in the morning. The woman was wearing an expensive coat and carrying shopping bags. Most people would have walked right past her, but she didn't. She sat down next to Lily and asked if she was okay. Lily's voice caught slightly, but she pushed through. She revealed that the woman was Victoria Stone. Mrs. Stone took her to a hotel, got her a room, ordered food, and stayed with her all night to make sure she was safe. The next morning, she tried to find her a foster home, but the system was overwhelmed. There were no placements available. So Lily asked if anyone knew what Mrs. Stone did. No one answered. Everyone was hanging on her every word. Lily explained that Mrs. Stone paid for her to stay in that hotel for 2 weeks while she worked to find her a permanent home. She bought her new clothes. She made sure she had food. And every single day, she came to visit and brought books. That's how Lily discovered she loved reading. Mrs. Stone gave her the first book she ever owned, a book about a girl who was also alone, but found her way through courage and determination. Lily held up the library card again. She continued, saying that when the hotel money ran out, Mrs. Stone gave her this library card and showed her that she could stay at the library during the day where it was safe and warm. She told Lily that education was the most powerful thing in the world and that nobody could ever take it away from her. She visited 3 times a week, bringing food and checking on her. She tried to help her through the foster system, but there were complications, legal issues with paperwork, her own legal troubles starting. Tears were running down Victoria's face now, but she was smiling through them. Lily said that when she found out Mrs. Stone was being accused of stealing from her charity, a charity meant to help children like her, she knew something was wrong. Because the woman who sat with her all night when she was terrified, who made sure she had food and books and hope, that woman would never steal from children. Never. Lily looked directly at Morrison. She acknowledged that Mr. Morrison was right, that documents didn't lie. But she was there to tell the part of the story that didn't show up in bank statements. She was there to tell them about the woman who saved her life. And she was going to prove that every single transaction he mentioned had an explanation that showed Mrs. Stone's innocence. She sat back down, and for a long moment, nobody moved. Judge Harrison had to clear his throat before he could speak. He thanked Lily, pausing before adding that what she had said was remarkable. He looked at Morrison, whose confident expression had faded considerably. The judge told Morrison he could call his first witness. As the prosecutor stood to call his first witness, Lily tugged on his sleeve. She asked Mr. Chen if she could ask the questions. Chen looked at Judge Harrison nervously, asking for guidance. Judge Harrison considered this. Technically, he had said Lily couldn't conduct formal courtroom procedures, but he was curious to see where this would go. He said he would allow it, with the understanding that Mr. Chen could take over at any time if needed. He told Lily to keep her questions simple and respectful. Lily agreed, standing on her chair again and clutching a piece of paper covered in her handwriting. She began by asking Miss Kim if she had said that only $800,000 could be directly traced to charitable activities. Miss Kim confirmed that was correct. Lily asked if that meant that only $800,000 was spent on charity, or if it just meant that that's what she could directly identify in her analysis. Miss Kim hesitated, admitting that, technically, yes, the latter was true. Lily asked if that meant that if there were charitable expenses that weren't obviously labeled as such in the records, she might have missed them. Miss Kim acknowledged it was possible, but she insisted she had conducted a very thorough review. Lily said she was sure she had, but asked about some specific items. She asked if Miss Kim had visited the property that was purchased in Southampton for $850,000. Miss Kim said no, she hadn't. Her job was to analyze financial records, not conduct physical inspections. Lily asked if that meant she didn't know what that property was being used for. Miss Kim admitted that no, not from personal observation. Lily made a note on her paper. She asked about the jewelry purchases totaling $125,000, asking if she had identified what specific jewelry was purchased. Miss Kim said the records showed purchases from high-end jewelry stores like Tiffany and Cartier. Lily asked if she had seen the actual jewelry or determined what happened to it after purchase. Sandra Kim was starting to look uncomfortable. She said no, she hadn't. Lily asked about the trips to Europe, asking if she had examined the purpose of those trips or looked at who Mrs. Stone met with or what activities she engaged in while traveling. Miss Kim said the records showed luxury hotel stays and first-class flights. That's what she based her assessment on. Lily nodded slowly, saying that Miss Kim was very good at analyzing financial records, but she asked if she would agree that numbers alone don't always tell the complete story. Miss Kim said she supposed that was possible. Lily thanked her, saying that was all she needed. Lily sat back down, and Morrison quickly stood up. He asked for redirect, then asked Miss Kim if, regardless of what the property was being used for now, it was true that it was purchased with charitable funds. She confirmed yes. He asked if, regardless of what happened to the jewelry after purchase, it was true that it was bought with money donated for children's charities. She said yes. He asked if, regardless of whom Mrs. Stone met with in Europe, it was true that she flew first class and stayed in 5-star hotels using foundation money. She answered yes to all of those questions. Morrison sat down with a satisfied smirk, but Judge Harrison noticed that Lily was still writing notes and didn't look worried at all. In fact, she looked like someone who had just confirmed exactly what she needed to know.
The prosecutor called several more witnesses over the next 2 hours. There was the foundation's former bookkeeper who testified that Victoria had personally authorized all the questionable transactions. There was a donor who said he felt betrayed when he learned his money had gone to luxury purchases instead of helping children. There was even a reporter who had investigated the foundation and found what appeared to be a clear pattern of abuse. Each time, Lily asked a few simple questions that seemed almost naive, but Judge Harrison, who had been evaluating witnesses for over 2 decades, started to see a pattern. Lily wasn't trying to destroy the prosecution's witnesses. She was gathering information, building something, piece by piece. During a recess, Judge Harrison called both lawyers and Lily to his chambers. Once the door was closed, he said he needed to understand what was happening in his courtroom. Mr. Morrison had presented compelling evidence of financial mismanagement. Mr. Chen had barely mounted a defense, and Lily, well, he didn't even know what she was doing, but she was doing something. Lily looked up at the judge with those serious eyes, asking if she could explain. The judge told her to please do. Lily explained that Mr. Morrison had shown that Mrs. Stone's foundation money on things that looked like personal expenses. He wasn't wrong about that. The money was spent, but he hadn't asked the most important question, which was why. The judge told her to go on. Lily said that Mrs. Stone's foundation helped children who fell through the cracks of the system. Children like her. But the thing about children who fell through the cracks was that they weren't easy to help through official channels. Foster care was overwhelmed. Group homes were full. The normal charitable activities that Mr. Morrison could trace, buying school supplies, funding programs, those only reached children who were already in the system. Judge Harrison leaned forward, intrigued. Lily asked, what about children who weren't in the system yet? Children who were hiding because they were afraid of being separated from siblings. Children who ran away from abusive foster homes. Children who were technically homeless but trying to stay under the radar. Judge Harrison asked if she was saying Mrs. Stone was helping children off the books. Lily said she was saying Mrs. Stone was helping children that nobody else would help,
in ways that nobody else would help them. And yes, some of that help didn't show up neatly in financial records. Morrison scoffed, saying this was pure speculation from a child who obviously had an emotional attachment to the defendant. There was no evidence to support any of this. Lily reached into her backpack, that perpetual surprises, and pulled out a folder. She told Morrison that actually she had evidence. She had spent the last 2 weeks tracking down other children Mrs. Stone helped. She found 12 of them. They had all written statements, and 6 of them were waiting outside this courtroom right now, ready to testify. She handed the folder to Judge Harrison, who opened it and began reading it. His expression changed from skeptical to surprised to deeply moved. Morrison's face had gone pale. He started to object, saying the statements were invalid, but Judge Harrison interrupted him. The judge said the statements were detailed, credible, and extremely relevant. He asked Morrison if his investigation had included interviewing any children who were helped by the foundation. Morrison shifted uncomfortably, explaining they focused on financial records. They spoke with adult donors and staff members. The judge asked if that meant they didn't talk to the children the foundation was supposed to help. Morrison explained that the official programs were minimal, so there weren't many children to interview through normal channels. Judge Harrison noted that apparently Mrs. Stone was helping children through abnormal channels. He closed the folder and looked at Lily with new respect. He asked the young lady how she had found all these children in 2 weeks. Lily explained that she knew where kids like them hid. She knew the shelters that didn't ask too many questions. She knew the libraries that let you stay after hours. She knew the subway stations where it was safe to sleep. And she knew how to talk to kids who didn't trust adults. She said this without any pride or boasting, just stating facts. Judge Harrison was quiet for a long moment. Then he made a decision.
He said they were going to hear from these children. Tomorrow morning, he wanted Lily's 6 witnesses ready to testify. He suggested Morrison use tonight to consider whether his theory of the case was as airtight as he thought. He told Mr. Chen he might want to let his client know that her case just became significantly more complicated and possibly more winnable. As they filed out of his chambers, Judge Harrison called out to Lily. She turned back. He asked where she was staying tonight. She hesitated, saying there was a shelter that usually had space. If not, the library stayed open until 9. Judge Harrison's heart broke a little more. He told Mr. Chen to please ensure that Lily had a safe place to stay and to bill it to Mrs. Stone's personal funds, not the foundation. Victoria spoke up, saying Lily could stay with her. She had an ankle monitor, but she was allowed to have guests at her apartment. Morrison started to object, but Judge Harrison cut him off with a look. The judge said that was acceptable, and they were adjourned until 9 in the morning. That evening, in Victoria Stone's Upper East Side apartment, a space that was elegant but not ostentatious, Lily sat at the kitchen table with a glass of milk and a sandwich that Victoria had made for her. It was the first real meal she'd had in 2 days. Victoria watched her eat with a mixture of love and sorrow. She asked Lily why she hadn't told her things were so bad. She thought the shelter she had connected her with was working out. Lily swallowed her bite of sandwich, explaining that they had lost funding last month and had to close. She didn't want to bother Victoria when she had her own problems. Victoria's voice cracked as she said that Lily was never a bother. She was the closest thing to family she had left. This was the opening Lily had been waiting for. She asked Mrs. Stone if she could ask something. She wanted to know why Victoria had really helped her that night in the park. Victoria was quiet for a moment. Then she got up, went to her bedroom, and returned with a photograph. She handed it to Lily. It showed a young Victoria, maybe in her 20s, standing with another woman of similar age. They were both smiling, arms around each other. Victoria said softly that the other woman in the photo was Lily's mother. Lily nearly dropped the glass of milk, asking what Victoria meant. Victoria explained that Sarah Thompson was her best friend. They grew up together, went to college together,
She was going to be the maid of honor at her wedding. But then she got engaged to a man who Sarah didn't like. Sarah tried to warn her that he was controlling, that he would isolate her from her friends and family. Victoria didn't listen. She chose him over Sarah. They didn't speak for 25 years. Tears were streaming down Victoria's face now. She continued saying that by the time she realized Sarah was right, by the time she divorced him and tried to find her, Sarah was already sick, terminal cancer. Victoria went to the hospital and they reconciled, but it was too late. Sarah died 3 weeks later, and Victoria found out she had a daughter, Lily, who would be alone. Lily's own eyes were wet. She said that her mother had talked about Victoria right before she died. She said her biggest regret was losing her best friend over a stupid argument. Victoria said she tried to find Lily after the funeral, but she had already disappeared into the system and then out of it. She looked for months, and then, by pure chance, or maybe fate, she found her on that park bench. The moment she saw Lily's face, she knew who she was. Lily had Sarah's eyes. Lily looked down at the photograph again, studying her mother's face. She had never seen this picture before. In it, her mother looked happy and healthy and young. She whispered, asking why Victoria didn't tell her. Victoria admitted she was ashamed. Ashamed that she had let her pride cost her 25 years with her best friend. Ashamed that she hadn't been there when Sarah got sick, hadn't been there when she died, hadn't been there for Lily afterward. She thought if she told Lily, Lily would hate her. Lily said she could never hate her. Victoria had saved her. Victoria reached across the table and took Lily's hands, saying no. Lily had saved her. After her divorce, she was empty. She had money but no purpose, no family, no real friends. She started the foundation because she thought if she helped children like Lily, maybe she could make up for abandoning her best friend's daughter. But she didn't know how to help through the official channels. The system was broken. It failed the kids who need help most. Lily said she understood now. The Southampton property was a safe house. Victoria confirmed it. She said she bought it and renovated it to shelter children who were in danger but couldn't or wouldn't go into foster care. There were counselors there, tutors, medical care, all paid for by the foundation, but she couldn't list it properly in the records because it was technically unauthorized. Lily asked about the jewelry. Victoria smiled slightly, saying she sold most of it and used the money to pay for medical care for children without insurance. There were laws against foundations giving direct cash to individuals, but there was no law against buying jewelry and then selling it for cash that could be used however she wanted. Lily asked about the trips to Europe. Victoria explained those were meetings with international child welfare organizations. She was learning about programs that worked in other countries, trying to bring those ideas back here. She stayed in expensive hotels because that's where the conferences were held. Lily was shaking her head in amazement. She said this was Victoria's defense and asked why she didn't just explain this from the beginning. Victoria explained that the moment she admitted to running an unauthorized shelter, the state would shut it down. The moment she admitted to those cash payments for medical care, the IRS would come after the foundation. The system she was trying to work around would crack down on every technically illegal thing she did, even though morally they were the right things to do. Lily asked if she was just going to go to prison rather than expose her work. Victoria said she was going to protect the children she was still helping. Yes, there were 8 kids at that Southampton house right now. If she exposed it to save herself, where would they go? Lily stood up abruptly, her chair scraping the floor. She said, no, that's not how this was going to work. They were going to save Victoria and protect those kids. There had to be a way. Victoria started to say that the law was clear, but Lily interrupted. Lily corrected her, saying the law was complicated, and there are always exceptions and nuances. She just needed to find them. She grabbed her backpack and pulled out her tablet, saying she was going to read every single case about charitable foundations and unauthorized programs. There had to be precedent somewhere. Victoria watched as this small, fierce, brilliant 8-year-old girl began searching through legal databases like a seasoned attorney, and she felt a surge of hope for the first time in months. Victoria whispered,
that your mother would be so proud of you." Lily looked up from her screen, saying her mother would be proud of Victoria too, for not giving up on helping kids, even when it became dangerous.
The next morning, courtroom 7 was packed. Word had spread about the homeless girl defending the rich woman, and reporters were lining the walls. Judge Harrison had to call for order 3 times before everyone settled down. The judge asked Mr. Morrison if he had additional witnesses. Morrison said the prosecution rested. Judge Harrison said very well and told Mr. Chen he could call his first witness. Chen stood and called Marcus Rivera. A teenage boy, maybe 16 or 17, walked to the witness stand. He was wearing clean clothes that were obviously borrowed, too big in the shoulders, too short in the legs, but he held himself with dignity as he was sworn in. Chen began by asking Marcus how he knew Victoria Stone. Marcus replied that she had saved his life 2 years ago. Morrison was already on his feet, objecting on relevance. Lily said, standing on her chair, that Marcus was one of the children Mrs. Stone helped through her foundation. His testimony directly addressed the question of where foundation money actually went. Judge Harrison nodded, saying he would allow it, and told them to proceed. Marcus took a breath and began his story. He explained that 2 years ago he was 15 and living in a group home in the Bronx. It was a bad place, really bad. Kids were getting hurt and nobody was doing anything about it. So he ran. He lived on the streets for 2 months. One night, he was sleeping in an alley when Mrs. Stone found him. She asked him why he wasn't in a shelter or foster care. He told her he couldn't go back to the group home, but he was too afraid to tell the authorities why. Chen asked what Mrs. Stone did. Marcus said she listened to his whole story. Then she told him about a place where he could stay, a house in Southampton where kids like him could be safe, while she worked to find them permanent solutions. She drove him there herself that night. Chen asked what the house was like. Marcus described it as a real home. There were bedrooms, a kitchen, a TV room. There were counselors and a nurse. They had tutors who helped them keep up with school. And most importantly, they were safe. Morrison was taking furious notes, but Judge Harrison noticed he didn't look triumphant anymore. Chen asked how long Marcus stayed there. Marcus said 6 months. He explained that Mrs. Stone worked with a different social worker, one she trusted, to find him a foster family that was actually safe. He was living with them now, and it was great. He was getting straight A's, he was on the basketball team, he was going to graduate next year. Marcus looked directly at Victoria, saying that if Mrs. Stone hadn't helped him, he'd probably be dead or in jail. Instead, he was going to college. The courtroom was absolutely silent. Chen thanked him and offered him to Morrison for cross-examination. But Morrison shook his head, saying he had no questions. What questions could he ask? The boy's testimony was devastating to his theory that Victoria had stolen from children. She had saved this child. The defense called 5 more witnesses, and each story was similar. A 14-year-old girl who had been trafficked and escaped. Victoria had sheltered her and gotten her specialized therapy. An 11-year-old boy whose parents had died. Victoria had supported him while he lived with a grandmother who couldn't afford to take care of him. A 17-year-old who had aged out of foster care with nowhere to go. Every single one of them testified that Victoria Stone had saved them when the official system had failed them. By the time the 6th witness finished, there wasn't a dry eye in the courtroom. Even Morrison looked shaken. Judge Harrison called a brief recess. During the break, Morrison approached Chen and Victoria, asking if they could talk privately. In a small conference room, Morrison sat across from Victoria and Lily. He looked tired. Morrison began by saying he wanted Mrs. Stone to know that he believed and still believed that he was pursuing a legitimate case. The financial irregularities were real, but he never imagined there was this other side to the story.
Victoria asked hopefully if he would drop the charges. Morrison sighed, saying he couldn't do that. He explained the problem was that even if her intentions were good, she still violated laws about how charitable foundations operate. She ran an unauthorized group home. She gave cash directly to individuals, which was prohibited for the type of foundation she established. She spent money on items that, regardless of the ultimate purpose, weren't properly documented as charitable expenses. Lily asked what he was saying. Morrison said he was saying the law was clear, even if the morality was complicated. He had a duty to enforce the law. Lily insisted there must be exceptions. There must be precedent for situations where someone breaks the letter of the law to uphold its spirit. Morrison actually smiled sadly at her, saying he thought she was going to be an amazing lawyer someday, but right now, he had a job to do. They returned to the courtroom, and Judge Harrison reconvened the session. The judge asked Morrison if he had a response to the defense's witnesses. Morrison stood, saying yes. The prosecution acknowledged that Mrs. Stone may have helped these children, but good intentions didn't excuse violations of the law. The statutes governing charitable foundations exist for important reasons. Mrs. Stone had other options. She could have worked within the system. She could have applied for proper licensing for her shelter. She could have partnered with established organizations. Instead, she chose to operate outside the law. And no matter how sympathetic the circumstances, that was still a crime. He sat down, and Judge Harrison turned to the defense and asked if Mr. Chen had closing arguments. Chen stood, but before he could speak, Lily raised her hand. She asked if she could address the court one final time. Judge Harrison looked at the prosecutor, asking for his input. Morrison spread his hands in a gesture of resignation, saying, "At this point, why not?" The judge said, "Very well, this was Lily's last opportunity." Lily climbed down from her chair and walked to the center of the courtroom. Standing there, she looked impossibly small and young, but when she began to speak, her voice filled the room. She began by saying that Mr. Morrison just said Mrs. Stone had other options. He said she could have worked within the system, and he was right. Technically, those options existed. But she wanted to tell them about the reality of those options. Lily began walking slowly back and forth like she had seen lawyers do in the online lectures she had watched. She explained that when her mother died, she tried to work within the system. She went to child services. She asked if anyone knew how long the wait was for a caseworker to see her. It was 3 weeks. She asked if anyone knew where an 8-year-old lived for 3 weeks while waiting for that appointment. The streets.
She paused, letting that sink in. Lily continued, saying that when Mrs. Stone found her, she tried to work within the system too. She called foster care agencies. The waiting list was 6 months. She called group homes. They were full. She called every official resource, and every single one told her the same thing. "We can't help right now. Come back in a few weeks, a few months. Fill out these forms. Wait your turn." Lily turned to face Morrison directly. She said that an 8-year-old on the streets couldn't wait a few months. A 15-year-old who ran from an abusive group home couldn't fill out forms and wait her turn. A child being trafficked needed help right now, not after the system processed paperwork. So Mrs. Stone made a choice: follow laws that would result in children being hurt or break laws to save them. Morrison said, though his voice lacked conviction, that it wasn't a justification for breaking the law. Lily shot back, asking if it wasn't. She said that she had spent 6 months reading law books, and she had learned that their entire legal system was built on the idea that laws should serve justice, not the other way around. There was a legal doctrine called necessity defense. It said that breaking a law was justified if it was necessary to prevent a greater harm.
Judge Harrison leaned forward, telling her to go on. Lily explained that Mrs. Stone broke financial regulations to prevent children from being abused, trafficked, or dying on the streets. That was textbook necessity defense, and there was precedent. She pulled out her notes, citing a case from the 1980s called United States v. Shun, where protesters broke laws to bring attention to humanitarian crises. The court ruled that when the legal system failed to protect people in immediate danger, breaking minor laws to help them could be justified. Morrison stood up, objecting that the case dealt with political protest, not financial crimes. It wasn't applicable here. Lily countered that it was absolutely applicable because both situations involved people choosing to break laws they deemed unjust in order to help others. The principle was the same. She turned to Judge Harrison. She said that she was 8 years old and she understood something that apparently many adults didn't. Laws were tools, not gods. They were supposed to protect people, help people, create justice. But when a law stopped doing that, when following it would result in children suffering, then following that law wasn't justice. It was bureaucracy. The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Judge Harrison had to bang his gavel. Lily continued, saying there was another issue. Mr. Morrison said Mrs. Stone should have gotten proper licensing for her shelter. She asked if anyone knew how long that process took. 18 months. She asked if anyone knew how many requirements there were. Background checks, facility inspections, zoning approvals, staffing certifications. It was designed to ensure safety, which was important. But it was also designed in a way that made it almost impossible to respond to immediate crises. She walked over to her stack of papers and held up a thick document. Lily explained that she had requested the application packet for running a licensed group home in New York State. It was 247 pages long, and it required an initial investment of at least $500,000 just to meet facility requirements. Mrs. Stone had the money to do that, but by the time she could have completed the 18-month process, how many children would have been hurt? How many would have died? Lily's voice grew passionate now. She said that Marcus Rivera would have been dead or in jail. That 14-year-old girl who was trafficked would still be trapped in that nightmare. Those children were alive and safe and had futures because Mrs. Stone didn't wait 18 months. She acted immediately, and yes, she broke some rules to do it, but she saved lives. Judge Harrison was nodding slowly, and even Morrison looked conflicted. Lily continued, addressing the jewelry purchases. She acknowledged that Mr. Morrison was right that Mrs. Stone bought expensive jewelry with foundation money. That looked bad, but she explained what he didn't mention. There was no law against a foundation buying assets. Foundations bought property, stocks, and yes, jewelry all the time as investments. The law only cared if those assets were then used for personal benefit.
She pulled out another document. Lily said she had obtained records showing that Mrs. Stone sold that jewelry for less than she paid for it, by the way, and every penny went to pay medical bills for children without insurance. She lost money on those transactions. That wasn't embezzlement. That was poor investment decisions in service of charity. Morrison started to stand, but Judge Harrison waved him back down, telling Lily to finish. Lily addressed the trips to Europe, acknowledging that yes, Mrs. Stone flew first class and stayed in nice hotels. She asked if anyone knew why. Because the conferences she was attending were at those hotels. Because the child welfare experts she was meeting with were staying in those hotels. If she had stayed at a cheap motel across town, she wouldn't have had access to the informal meetings and conversations that happened in the evenings. She would have missed half the value of the trip. Lily took a breath. She said she wasn't saying Mrs. Stone didn't make mistakes. She did. She should have documented things better. She should have been more transparent. But the difference between a mistake and a crime was intent. Mrs. Stone never intended to steal. She intended to help children that nobody else would help, using every resource she had. She walked back to the center of the courtroom and looked up at Judge Harrison. Lily said that she was standing there because Mrs. Stone saved her. Not just physically, though she did that too. She saved her from giving up. She taught her that one person with courage and compassion could make a difference, even when the whole system was against them. If the judge punished her for that, he was telling every good person in the world that it was safer to follow rules than to save lives. And that wasn't justice. That was cowardice. The courtroom exploded. People were shouting, some in agreement, some in outrage. Judge Harrison banged his gavel repeatedly until order was restored. He asked if that was everything. Lily said almost. She had one more thing. She reached into her backpack one final time and pulled out a folder. She explained these were signed statements from 15 more children that Mrs. Stone helped, children she didn't have time to bring to court, but who wanted their voices heard. These were letters from 3 social workers who said Mrs. Stone's shelter filled a critical gap in services. These were thank you notes from 8 foster families who received children from Mrs. Stone's program, children who were prepared and supported in ways the official system never could have managed. And then there was one more thing. She pulled out one last piece of paper, her hand trembling slightly. She said this was a letter her mother wrote to Mrs. Stone 26 years ago, right after their argument. Her mother saved every important document, and she found this in her things after she died. She didn't understand what it meant until last night when Mrs. Stone told her the truth. Lily began reading aloud, her voice thick with emotion. The letter said, "Dear Victoria, I know you're angry with me for questioning your relationship with James. I know you think I'm being a bad friend, but I'm writing this because I love you, and I need you to know that no matter what happens, even if we never speak again, I will always treasure our friendship. You are the best person I know, and I believe in you. If you ever need me for anything, I'll be there. With love always, Sarah." Tears were streaming down Lily's face now, and down Victoria's face, and down the half the people in the courtroom. Lily said her mother believed in Mrs. Stone even when they weren't speaking. She believed Mrs. Stone was a good person, and she was right. Mrs. Stone made mistakes, but she wasn't a criminal. She was a hero. And if they sent her to prison for saving children, then what hope was there for any of them? Lily folded the letter carefully and walked back to her seat. Victoria pulled her into a tight hug, both of them crying. Judge Harrison had to remove his glasses and wipe his own eyes. He cleared his throat several times before he could speak. He asked if anyone else wished to be heard before he made his ruling. Morrison stood slowly, asking if he could have a moment to confer with his office. The judge said he could. Morrison left the courtroom and returned 10 minutes later. When he spoke, his voice was different, softer, more uncertain. He began by saying that after hearing the testimony and arguments, the prosecution would like to amend its position. They believe there was sufficient evidence of financial irregularities to proceed with some charges. However, they believed the circumstances warranted consideration of mitigating factors. The prosecution recommended that Mrs. Stone be found guilty of financial mismanagement and improper documentation, but that sentencing take into account the significant good her actions achieved. They recommended community service, restitution to properly document and legitimize her charitable work, and probation rather than prison time. It wasn't a complete victory, but it was far better than anyone had expected. Judge Harrison nodded slowly, saying that seemed reasonable. However, he would like to take this under advisement and issue his ruling tomorrow morning. They were adjourned. As the courtroom emptied, dozens of people approached Lily, reporters wanting interviews, lawyers wanting to give her their cards, and many just wanting to shake her hand and tell her she had done something remarkable. But Lily stayed close to Victoria, holding her hand, not letting go.
The next morning, courtroom 7 was even more packed than the day before. Judge Harrison entered and everyone stood. The judge told everyone to please be seated. He said he had given this case a great deal of thought overnight. It was one of the most unusual cases he had encountered in his career, and not just because of the young advocate who helped present the defense. He looked at Lily and smiled. He said first he wanted to address Lily Thompson directly. He told the young lady that what she did in this courtroom was extraordinary. She showed more courage, intelligence, and heart than many attorneys he had seen. She taught him that sometimes they needed to look beyond the letter of the law to find its spirit. He didn't know what she would do with her life, but he hoped she would consider becoming a lawyer. They needed people like her in the legal system. Lily blushed and whispered her thanks. Judge Harrison said, now, as to his ruling. He asked Mrs. Stone to please stand. Victoria stood, with Michael Chen on one side and Lily holding her hand on the other. The judge explained he had reviewed all the evidence and testimony in this case. He had also spent considerable time researching legal precedent for situations where individuals break laws with good intentions. The doctrine of necessity that Lily cited was indeed real, though its application was complex and narrow. The courtroom held its breath. Judge Harrison said that after careful consideration, he found that Mrs. Victoria Stone did violate certain financial regulations governing charitable foundations. Specifically, she failed to properly document expenditures, operated an unlicensed group home, and made direct cash payments to individuals using foundation funds. Victoria's face fell, and Lily squeezed her hand tighter. The judge continued, saying, however, he also found that these violations were committed not for personal gain, but with the genuine intent to help children in immediate danger, children whom the official system had failed. While this didn't completely excuse the violations, it did provide extraordinary mitigating circumstances. He closed his notes and looked directly at Victoria. Judge Harrison announced that he was sentencing Mrs. Stone to 3 years of probation. During this time, she would work with the state to properly license and document her shelter program. She would undergo regular audits to ensure full compliance with all regulations. She would be required to complete 500 hours of community service, though he suspected the work she was already doing would more than fulfill that requirement. Relief flooded the courtroom. Several people gasped or cried out in happiness. The judge continued, raising his voice to be heard over the commotion. He said, furthermore, he was ordering the State Child Services Agency to fast-track the licensing process for Mrs. Stone's Southampton facility. If an 18-month process could be compressed to 6 months with adequate resources, then it should be. The children currently in that home would be allowed to remain there during the licensing process under regular supervision to ensure their safety. He banged his gavel once. Judge Harrison said finally he was recommending that the state legislature review the processes for emergency child welfare interventions. Clearly, there were situations where the current system was inadequate, and they needed better mechanisms for good people to help children in crisis without breaking the law to do so. He looked around the courtroom. The judge said this case had shown him that sometimes the law lagged behind justice,
and they needed brave people to push the law forward. He told Mrs. Stone that she took risks to save children. She made mistakes in how she did it, but her heart was in the right place. He hoped she would continue her work, but now within the bounds of the law. He turned to Lily one more time. He said that he was issuing an order that Lily be placed in Mrs. Stone's care as a foster placement pending full adoption proceedings. He trusted Mrs. Stone would provide her with a loving home while she continued her clearly exceptional education. Lily's eyes went wide. She asked if she could really live with Mrs. Stone? The judge said really. She saved Mrs. Stone, and now Mrs. Stone could properly save her back. The courtroom erupted in applause. Judge Harrison didn't even try to stop it. He just smiled and banged his gavel one final time, declaring the court adjourned. 6 months later, Lily sat in the library, her library, where she had spent so many cold nights, but this time she was there during regular hours, surrounded by other students. She was enrolled in a private school now, living with Victoria in a comfortable apartment. The adoption was almost finalized, but Lily still came to this library every Saturday because she had made herself a promise.
A quiet voice interrupted her reading. Lily looked up to see a girl about her age, maybe 9 or 10, wearing clothes that were too thin for the cold weather outside. The girl asked if she was Lily, the girl from the news. Lily confirmed that she was. The girl said she needed help. She explained that she ran away from her group home because it wasn't safe. She had been sleeping in the park for 3 nights and she was scared. Lily stood up and put a gentle hand on the girl's shoulder, asking what her name was. The girl said her name was Isabella. Lily told Isabella that first thing, she was going to be safe now. She promised. She said she would make a phone call. Lily pulled out her cell phone, a gift from Victoria, and dialed a number she now had on speed dial. She greeted Mrs. Martinez and explained she was at the library and there was a girl there who needed help. She asked if right now would be great, then thanked her. She hung up and smiled at Isabella. Lily explained that Mrs. Martinez ran the Southampton house. It was licensed now, totally official. She would be there in 30 minutes to pick her up. In the meantime, she asked if Isabella had eaten today. Isabella shook her head. Lily said to come on. There was a cafe next door, and it was her treat. As they walked out of the library together, Lily thought about how much had changed in 6 months. Victoria's shelter was now operating legally with state funding and proper oversight. 3 more similar shelters had opened in other parts of the city, inspired by Victoria's model, and the state legislature actually passed a new law, nicknamed Lily's Law, that created an emergency hotline and rapid response system for children in immediate danger. But more than any of that, Lily had found something she thought she had lost forever: a family. That evening at dinner in their apartment, Victoria asked about Lily's day. Lily said between bites of pasta that she helped another girl today. She was at the Southampton house now. Victoria smiled, saying Lily was building quite a network. Pretty soon, she would have helped as many children as Victoria had. Lily said seriously that was the goal. But she was going to do it the right way. Legal, documented, by the book. She was going to prove that you could help people and follow the rules. Victoria added with a knowing look that Lily would do that until the rules got in the way of helping people. Lily grinned, saying, "Well, yeah, obviously." They both laughed.
Later that night, as Lily was getting ready for bed, she looked at the photograph Victoria had given her, the one showing her mother and Victoria as young women, happy and hopeful. Lily whispered to the photo, saying she wished her mom could see this. She wished she could see that her best friend became Lily's family, that the two people she loved most found each other again. She thought her mother would be really happy. She placed the photo on her nightstand, next to her stack of legal books. Because old habits died hard, and Lily still read legal theory every night before bed. Victoria knocked softly and came in, asking if Lily was ready for sleep. Lily said almost, and asked if she could ask Victoria something. Victoria said anything. Lily asked if Victoria thought the law would ever be good enough. Would we ever have a system that didn't need people to break rules to help others? Victoria sat on the edge of the bed and thought about this carefully. She said she didn't know, but she did know that every generation made the law a little better than the last. The laws protecting children today are much better than they were 50 years ago. And that was because brave people, people like Lily, stood up and demanded change. Lily asked if they just kept fighting. Victoria confirmed they kept fighting, but they fought smart. They fought legal. And when the law wasn't good enough, they changed the law instead of breaking it. Lily said that sounded hard. Victoria said it was hard, but Lily was the girl who taught herself constitutional law at 8 years old to defend someone in court. She thought Lily could handle it. Lily smiled and snuggled under her blanket. She said Victoria's name softly. Victoria asked what she needed. Lily said she loved her. Victoria's eyes filled with tears, the happy kind. She said she loved Lily too, more than she knew. She kissed Lily's forehead and turned off the light. As Lily drifted off to sleep, she dreamed of courtrooms and children and justice. She dreamed of a world where no child would ever have to choose between safety and legality, where no good person would ever have to break the law to save a life. It was a big dream for an 8-year-old. But then again, Lily Thompson had never been a typical 8-year-old. If you enjoyed Lily's incredible story of courage and justice, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. What would you have done in her situation? Do you think the law should make exceptions for people trying to help others? If this story moved you, please consider hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel for more inspiring stories like this one. Your support helps us bring these powerful tales to more people who need to hear them. And if you know someone who would appreciate this message about standing up for what's right, even when it's difficult, please share this video with them. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time, remember, sometimes the smallest voices can create the biggest change.